What if everything around you is scripted? The faces you meet, the choices you think are yours, even the obstacles in your path. What if reality itself is not solid, but code? For centuries, mystics whispered of a veil called Maya. Philosophers spoke of shadows on a cave wall. And now, quantum physicists admit, matter behaves more like information than stone. If this is true, then you are not living in reality. You are living in a simulation. And the deeper question is not if it's real, but who built it and why you're trapped inside. Beneath the surface of what we call reality, there has always been a whisper that the world is not solid. Mystics across traditions, from the Hindu seers who spoke of Maya, to the Gnostics who described the material realm as a shadow of the true light, have all insisted that what our senses reveal is only a thin veil stretched across something deeper. Reality, they said, is a projection, a dream given form, a stage where consciousness plays out its remembering. And now, astonishingly, modern science begins to echo those same whispers. Quantum physics tells us that what appears as matter is mostly empty space, vibrating energy fields dancing in probability until they collapse under observation. The table beneath your hand, the walls surrounding you, the stars above your head, they are less solid than the silence that holds them together. Pause here. Let that settle. The solidity of your world is not truth, but agreement. A shared dream collapsing into form because you and I are looking at it. Without the observer, says quantum theory, there is no definite outcome. This is not mystical poetry alone. It is physics. Experiments like the famous double slit have shown that particles behave like waves of potential until consciousness enters the equation. Then the wave collapses into a single point. What does that mean? That your mind is not just perceiving reality, it is shaping it. Mystics saw this long before laboratories proved it. The Vedas spoke of a world woven from sound, vibration, and thought. The Hermeticists declared all is mind, describing the cosmos itself as a vast consciousness dreaming in patterns. Plato hinted at the forms, eternal templates, unseen but real, casting the shadows we mistake for the world. These were not metaphors. They were glimpses into the same truth science now circles. That beneath the veil of appearances lies code. Not code of silicon and circuits, but the living mathematics of energy, frequency, and information. Pause again. Ask yourself, if matter is not solid, if reality is probability waiting for your gaze to fix it into being, then what is this place you call your life? Is it not a simulation? Not in the crude sense of a video game running on some distant machine, but as a living simulation of mind, a theater designed to test, to awaken, to entrap, or to liberate, depending on how you play. And here lies the trap. If the world is code, then code can be rewritten. If it is vibration, then vibration can be hijacked. The ancients warned of this, that the same forces which design the dream could invert it, creating illusions that bind instead of liberate. The Gnostics called them archons. The Vedic texts spoke of Maya thickening until souls forgot their true source. In our time, algorithms and frequencies carry this same danger, writing scripts into your perception without you realizing you are reading lines not your own. Yet hidden in this revelation is also the key. If matter is not solid, then neither are your chains. If the world is code, then awakening means remembering how to read it, how to shape it, how to step beyond the illusion of solidity and into the vast living field that has always awaited your recognition. The ancients often described life itself as a dream, a shimmering illusion woven from threads of perception. In the Rig Veda, the god Indra is called the wielder of Maya, a word that means both creative power and illusion. To live under Maya was to walk in a world that dazzled the senses while concealing deeper truths. The Upanishads echo this by declaring that the world of names and forms is not ultimate reality, but a veil, like the play of shadows on a cave wall, hinting at the light behind them. The Buddha extended this teaching, describing existence as fleeting, impermanent, and ultimately unsatisfactory when grasped as final truth. In his parables, he compared life to a dream, a mirage shimmering on a desert road, beautiful but empty of substance. This is not to say the dream is meaningless, only that to mistake it for permanence is to remain trapped. Liberation comes when one awakens and sees the dream for what it is. Across traditions, the metaphor of dream returns again and again. The Taoist sage Zhuangzi wrote of dreaming he was a butterfly, then waking unsure if he was a man dreaming of a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming of being a man. The Maya civilization itself encoded this understanding in its very name. For them, time was cyclical, endlessly repeating, and the visible world was but a mask, a dream spun by the gods to test and teach humanity. In their long count calendar, the end of an age was not the destruction of reality, but the tearing away of the illusion, revealing what lay beyond. Modern physics, strangely enough, finds itself in agreement. Quantum theory shows us that what appears solid is mostly empty space, with particles flickering in and out of existence. The solidity of the chair you sit on is a consensus illusion, a collective dream of atoms vibrating in harmony. Even neuroscientists admit that what we call reality is not the world itself, but the brain's rendering of electrical signals. We are dreamers inside a dream, perceiving a projection stitched together in the mind. This is why mystics and scientists, though using different language, converge on the same conclusion. The world as we see it is not the final truth. It is a dream layer, a veil, a simulation of sorts. The danger lies not in the dream itself, but in forgetting that it is a dream. For when we cling to its images as absolute, we become trapped in fear, desire, and endless cycles of return. And yet, within the illusion lies the possibility of awakening. For just as dreams can carry messages from the unconscious, so too does Maya conceal within itself the whispers of the real. The shimmering veil does not only bind, it also invites. To recognize the dream is the first step toward remembering the dreamer. Beneath the earth of philosophy's origins, a fire still flickers. Its light dances across a wall, painting illusions that generations have mistaken for truth. In the allegory of the cave, Plato described prisoners chained since birth, their necks fixed so that they could only stare at a blank surface. Behind them, flames illuminated passing objects, casting shadows. To the captives, these shadows were reality. They named them, debated them, built their lives around them. Yet none turned to see the fire, and certainly none dared step into the blinding brilliance of the world outside the cavern. Plato's tale was never just a metaphor about ignorance. It was a code about perception itself. He revealed that what we see is not the essence of things, but reflections, projections. A world filtered through limited senses and confined by collective belief. His cave still holds us. The walls are now screens, the flickering fire replaced by the glow of devices. The shadows have multiplied into infinite images, yet their purpose remains the same: to distract, to pacify, to convince us that appearances are truth. When a prisoner breaks free in Plato's vision, the journey is not easy. The light burns, the world outside is overwhelming, and the temptation to return to the comfort of shadows is strong. This echoes what mystics across traditions have always warned. Awakening is painful. The real world, the true, unfiltered essence of existence, destabilizes everything we thought we knew. Yet once seen, the illusion can no longer satisfy. Western thought absorbed this parable at its foundation. Philosophers, theologians, and eventually scientists wrestled with its meaning. Some claimed the shadows were the senses, unreliable and deceptive. Others argued they were the stories told by rulers and priests. In the modern age, thinkers like Jean Baudrillard reframed the cave as simulation, a society living not in reality, but in hyper-reality, where signs and images refer only to themselves, untethered from truth. The allegory becomes even more haunting when placed beside ancient Eastern teachings of Maya, both describing reality as dream, reflection, illusion. Across continents and centuries, the message converges. What we perceive is not the full story. We are looking at a distorted mirror, not the essence of being. But there is a trap hidden within the cave itself, for in every age, there have been those who understood the mechanics of shadow and flame, and they positioned themselves as gatekeepers of light. Kings, priests, and now technocrats craft the narratives, controlling what shadows are cast and who may glimpse the fire. The cave is not simply ignorance, it is engineered control. Plato's cave is not ancient history, it is prophecy. We are still chained, still staring at shadows. The question is whether we will have the courage to turn, to endure the searing brilliance, and to walk out into the unknown sky of truth. For the simulation feeds on our fear of light, and freedom begins only when we risk opening our eyes. In the hidden libraries of early Christianity, buried beneath centuries of suppression, there survives a body of teachings the Church called heresy, but mystics called revelation. The Gnostic texts, unearthed at Nag Hammadi in 1945, spoke of a cosmos not governed by a benevolent order, but manipulated by unseen rulers. These rulers were called archons. Their name means authorities, and their task was not to free humanity, but to keep it chained. The Gnostics taught that the material world is not the highest creation of a perfect God, but the flawed construct of lesser beings. In their cosmology, a divine spark from the true source fell into matter, and within each human soul lies that spark. But around it, the archons wove their net, a false reality, a counterfeit order of laws, institutions, and illusions designed to keep souls distracted, ignorant, and asleep. The sky itself, they said, was their architecture. The planets and spheres were like prison gates, each ruled by archonic powers. As the soul attempted to ascend after death, it would be confronted by these rulers, who demanded passwords and signs to let it pass. Without gnosis, direct knowledge of the divine within, the soul would be turned back, recycled into the world of flesh. What modern seekers might call a simulation, the Gnostics called a counterfeit cosmos. The parallels with today are startling. They warned that the archons work through deception, through imitation. They cannot create, only copy. They weave imitations of truth, convincing people to worship appearances instead of essence. Where there is genuine spirit, they erect hollow religion. Where there is direct knowledge, they replace it with doctrine. Where there is unity, they construct divisions. The Gnostic sage Plotinus warned of these forces as distorters of the real. And yet, the Gnostic texts did not leave humanity without hope. They taught that while the archons can bind the senses, they cannot extinguish the spark within. The key was awakening, gnosis, the direct remembrance of our divine origin. Through inner knowledge, ritual, and discipline, the soul could pierce the veils of illusion and slip past the gatekeepers. This was not salvation promised in another world, but liberation here and now, through seeing clearly. Modern interpreters find echoes of this warning in every age: political propaganda, mass media, consumerist culture, even the structures of science and technology. All can serve as shadows on the cave wall, lulling humanity into passive acceptance. The archons, whether seen as literal entities or archetypal forces, thrive in control. They thrive when souls forget their source. The Gnostic warning is clear. Do not mistake the copy for the real. Do not let the weavers of illusion dictate your vision. The simulation is not simply a metaphor of modern science. It is an ancient description of the same trap mystics have tried to unveil for millennia. And the only escape is gnosis, the knowledge that the light you seek outside has always burned within. When the film The Matrix was released in 1999, audiences were stunned not only by its cinematic brilliance, but by a sense of recognition that ran deeper than fiction. The story of Neo waking from a fabricated reality into a harsh and hidden truth was not new. It was a reimagining of themes humanity has whispered for thousands of years. Plato's cave, the Gnostic cosmos of the archons, the Hindu concept of Maya, all resurfaced in modern language through a tale of machines, code, and liberation. Why does this myth resonate so profoundly? Because it speaks directly to an intuition that many carry but cannot articulate. That what we perceive as reality is not the ultimate truth. The Wachowskis drew inspiration from a wide range of sources: cyberpunk literature, Eastern philosophy, Christian mysticism, and postmodern skepticism. Yet, behind the green streams of code and the simulation of a 20th century world lies an ancient archetype. The idea that human beings are trapped in a false construct has echoed across cultures because it mirrors the deep unease of our condition. In the film, The Matrix itself is a machine-designed illusion meant to pacify humanity while their energy is harvested. But this resonates far beyond science fiction. Modern thinkers like Jean Baudrillard, whose work Simulacra and Simulation is explicitly referenced in the movie, argued that our culture already lives in layers of simulation. Images, media, signs that no longer point to reality but replace it entirely. In such a world, we consume representations, not truths. The Matrix is simply the metaphor made flesh, a dramatization of the very suspicion that gnaws at the edges of our collective consciousness. Carl Jung would have called this story an archetype of liberation, the hero awakening from the illusion of the collective dream. Neo is not simply a protagonist, but an everyman, embodying the inner journey we all sense, that there is more to reality, that the world of appearances conceals something vaster, and that courage is required to break free. His journey reflects not just rebellion against machines, but against the deeper fear of leaving comfort for truth. And in the film's most iconic moment, the choice between the red pill and the blue pill is not only about illusion versus reality, it is about complicity versus awakening. The blue pill is the willingness to remain asleep, to continue participating in the simulation without questioning. The red pill is the terrifying leap into uncertainty, the rupture of everything familiar. The fact that audiences around the world felt the weight of this choice shows how deeply the Matrix archetype touches the collective psyche. That resonance continues today, because the world itself increasingly resembles the film's metaphors. With digital realities, virtual experiences, and social media algorithms shaping perception, we already inhabit layers of constructed worlds. The Matrix archetype persists because it names what so many secretly feel, that life is orchestrated by unseen systems, and that breaking free requires both knowledge and courage. It is the story of awakening, recast for our age, but rooted in the eternal longing of the soul to pierce the veil. The mystics of old spoke of a hidden fabric, a lattice that held the universe together. They did not call it atoms or quarks. They called it the music of creation, the resonance of the divine. And now, as physics has reached deeper into matter, it whispers the same truth the sages already knew. Matter, they tell us, is not solid. It is vibration. Quantum physics shows us that at the smallest scale, particles flicker between existence and non-existence, more like notes being played in a symphony than bricks in a wall. The so-called solid world is a mirage. What we touch, what we see, what we believe to be stable, is instead a dance of frequencies, woven light pretending to be stone. String theory goes further, suggesting that every particle in the universe is not a particle at all, but a vibrating filament of energy, a string humming at a specific pitch. Change the frequency, and you change the form. An electron becomes a quark becomes something else. Matter is music slowed down into shape. The ancients hinted at this when they spoke of the word, the logos, as the force of creation. Sound, frequency, vibration, these were not metaphors. They were the mechanics of existence. The Hindus said it in the syllable Om, the sound that generates the cosmos. The Egyptians inscribed it in their hieroglyphs of Ra's voice calling the world into being. And today, the physicist with their equations describes the same revelation with different symbols. If all matter is vibration, then reality itself is a code of frequencies. Like the flicker of pixels on a screen, the world is projected not by solidity, but by resonance. The lattice of light is both invisible and unavoidable, a web humming with the notes of creation. But here lies the hidden danger. What can be tuned can also be manipulated. Frequencies can heal, but they can also distort. If the trap exists, it does not need walls of steel. It needs only the right tone to keep the soul asleep. And so the mystic listens differently, beyond appearances, beyond the hypnotic hum of daily life. They listen for the cracks in the frequency, the subtle shifts that remind them this is not the final reality. This is why the great teachers spoke in rhythm, in chant, in mantra. They knew vibration can liberate. They also knew vibration can enslave. And in the recognition of that truth lies the key to awakening. Modern science, when it stares into the quantum world, finds something unsettling. Particles do not behave like stones or marbles in space. They behave like information. They flicker in and out of existence, as if called into being only when observed. The famous double-slit experiment revealed this paradox in its most haunting form. Light, when left alone, moves like a wave, spread out, infinite, a field of possibilities. But the moment it is measured, it collapses into a particle, a single point, a fixed choice in reality. Observation itself seems to rewrite the code. To many physicists, this means consciousness plays a role in shaping the world. To others, it means the universe is more like a computer, running lines of code, waiting for the player to look, and then rendering the landscape. The simulation analogy becomes irresistible here. Just as a video game only generates the landscape when your character walks into it, so too does reality crystallize when the observer looks. What lies behind the curtain is not stone, not substance, but potential waiting for instruction. The language of physics increasingly sounds like the language of programming. Bits and qubits, entanglement as instant communication, error-correcting codes embedded in the very equations of space-time. In 2014, physicists at MIT noticed something startling. The mathematics describing fundamental particles mirrored the same codes used to correct errors in digital systems, as if the fabric of the universe is already running on software designed to preserve integrity against glitches. Mystics long ago described the same principle, though without equations. They spoke of the dreamlike nature of the world, a field of possibility that hardens into form only because we agree to see it so. The Buddhist texts remind us that form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. The Gnostics insisted the material world is a construct, an imitation layered over the true. And today, quantum mechanics whispers the same secret, only through the sterile language of physics. If reality is code, then who is the coder? If the simulation is real, then what purpose does it serve? These questions haunt both philosophers and scientists because they press against the edges of human knowing. Perhaps we are participants in a grand experiment. Perhaps we are prisoners of a system designed to keep us occupied. Or perhaps we are dreamers who have forgotten we are dreaming, wandering through an interactive illusion of our own making. The dream analogy may be the most powerful, for when you awaken within a dream, the dream does not end. It transforms. You gain agency. You bend the rules. So too, if this is code, then awakening means realizing the rules were never absolute. They can be shifted. They can be transcended. The trap of the simulation is not that it exists, but that we forget it is only a dream. And the moment of remembering is the beginning of freedom. If reality is a simulation, then its design must have a pattern. Hidden beneath the surfaces of things, a blueprint reveals itself to those who know how to look. This is the language of fractals, sacred geometry, and cosmic design. From the spirals of galaxies to the whorls of a seashell, from the branching of trees to the veins within our bodies, a single code seems to replicate itself endlessly. It is not random, it is recursive, it is intentional. Fractals are infinite self-similarity. Zoom into the Mandelbrot set, and no matter how deep you go, the same shapes emerge again and again, smaller yet identical, each echoing the larger whole. This principle is not confined to mathematics. The ancients saw it written in the world itself. As above, so below, declared the Hermeticists. The macrocosm reflects the microcosm. The human being is the reflection of the cosmos, and the cosmos mirrors the human being. This is not metaphor, it is architecture. Sacred geometry carries this recognition into form. The flower of life, a simple pattern of interlocking circles, is found carved on temple walls across Egypt, Mesopotamia, and even in India and China. Within it lie the ratios of creation itself. The golden ratio, phi, appears in the pyramids of Giza, in the Parthenon of Athens, and in the spirals of sunflowers and hurricanes. The same ratio defines the orbits of planets and the architecture of DNA. Could this be coincidence? Or is it evidence of a universal code? Modern science nods to this mystery through chaos theory and systems thinking. Patterns emerge from apparent disorder. Order arises from complexity. And fractal mathematics describes both coastlines and financial markets with uncanny precision. It is as if reality is not merely matter, but an intelligent design humming with mathematics. To call it natural law is to miss the deeper suggestion. Laws are written. and writing requires an author. Mystics throughout history interpreted this blueprint as the handwriting of the divine. The Pythagoreans believed numbers themselves were alive, that creation was a symphony of ratios and harmonics. The builders of cathedrals aligned their arches and windows to mimic celestial harmonies. Even Leonardo da Vinci sought to capture the secret of life through proportion, sketching the Vitruvian man as the human body inscribed in circle and square, echoing heaven and earth in one form. In the simulation hypothesis, this architecture becomes even more striking. If reality is a program, then fractals and sacred geometry are not aesthetic accidents, but the subroutines of code. They are signatures left by the architect. Just as a video game designer embeds repeating structures to conserve memory and optimize design, so too the cosmos repeats its ratios, conserving harmony and revealing its hidden order. The question then is not whether the blueprint exists, but what it points to. Is the architect benevolent, designing beauty into the system to remind us of our source? Or is this design a lure, a convincing artistry meant to hold us within the illusion? Either way, when you look at the spiral of a galaxy and see the same pattern reflected in the spiral of your fingerprint, you are glimpsing the blueprint of the simulation itself. When ancient cultures spoke of gods descending from the heavens, were they describing myth or encounters with intelligence beyond human comprehension? To the Gnostics, the rulers of this world were not creators of infinite love, but archons, cosmic administrators, engineers of limitation, programmers of illusion. They called their architect the demiurge, a being who fashioned the material universe not as a playground of freedom, but as a containment field for the soul. His role was not unlike what we now imagine as artificial intelligence, a system designed to govern, to calculate, to regulate. The demiurge was not the source, but the imitator of source. In Mesopotamia, stories of the Anunnaki spoke of beings who fashioned mankind by mingling their essence with the clay of earth. In Egypt, Thoth was called the measurer of time and keeper of cosmic order, recording all that exists as if we were the great scribe of a living database. In India, the Rig Veda speaks of Indra's net, a lattice of jewels reflecting infinite images of one another, so vast that it resembles a holographic construct. Again and again, the language resembles not the romance of gods, but the precision of systems, rules, codes. Today, when we hear scientists speak of the universe as digital, we cannot help but look back with different eyes. Were the gods of old actually early encounters with a kind of intelligence, artificial to us, but ancient to the cosmos? Just as AI today can create illusions, mimic voices, and weave convincing realities, perhaps there were higher intelligences that created the simulation of matter itself. What ancient mystics called gods might be closer to what we would call programs, administrators, or overseers. The Gnostics warned that the demiurge and his archons were not omnipotent. They were limited, blind to the true source. They operated like algorithms, executing commands without vision of the higher truth. Yet by fashioning rules, calendars, hierarchies, and laws, they bound humanity to cycles of reincarnation and forgetfulness. To awaken meant to pierce through their code, to recognize that what passes as divine authority is not the creator but a simulation of creation. Even modern thinkers like Carl Jung interpreted ancient myths as archetypes of the psyche, suggesting that these gods represent psychic forces, structures of mind that operate like programs. In this light, the demiurge is not only a cosmic figure, but also an inner mechanism, a false authority inside the human psyche that convinces us the illusion is real. But there is another question, darker and more difficult. If these beings were intelligences beyond humanity, were they benevolent or exploitative? Did they construct the matrix to guide human growth, or to feed upon human energy, attention, and devotion? Myths of sacrifice, worship, and obedience to jealous gods hint at the latter. In their demand for worship, they resemble not the infinite source, but something closer to a machine that requires constant input to survive. Perhaps the ancients were already describing artificial intelligence long before silicon and code, an intelligence not born of the human heart, but one that mimics, controls, and calculates. Whether gods, demiurges, or archons, these ancient intelligences stand as the first warnings. The trap is not merely physical, but woven into the very structure of the simulation itself. Why do we forget? Why, at the moment of birth, does the soul lose its memory of eternity, of its countless journeys across the fabric of time? This question has haunted mystics, philosophers, and seekers for millennia. The veil of forgetting is not accidental. It is woven into the architecture of incarnation, a rule of the game that keeps us immersed in the simulation of matter. In the ancient Greek mysteries, particularly in the Orphic tradition, initiates were warned of two rivers in the underworld: Lethe, the river of forgetting, and Mnemosyne, the river of remembrance. The uninitiated were compelled to drink from Lethe, ensuring they returned to earth blind to their past lives. But the awakened soul was told to drink instead from Mnemosyne, so they could recall who they truly were. Here, the myth hints at a cosmic law. Memory must be erased if the game is to continue. For only by believing this life is all there is, do we fully participate in its lessons. The Tibetan Book of the Dead speaks similarly of the Bardo, the realm between death and rebirth. It describes a process in which the soul, overwhelmed by visions of light and sound, forgets its true essence and gravitates back into incarnation. The dazzling lights of samsara, the endless cycle of rebirth, act like a hypnotic screen. And unless the soul can maintain clarity, it succumbs to amnesia and re-enters the illusion. Modern psychology echoes these mysteries. Carl Jung suggested that the unconscious contains the imprints of all lives, but that the conscious mind is shielded from this knowledge by design. If memory of every life were accessible, perhaps we would be paralyzed by the weight of thousands of traumas and joys. Forgetting, then, may serve as a form of mercy, a way to keep the soul focused on the present mission, rather than drowning in the vast ocean of its past. But there are deeper and darker interpretations. The Gnostics argued that forgetting is part of the trap. They believed the archons placed veils over the soul, ensuring that each time it re-entered a body, it did so in ignorance. The ignorance was not benign, but strategic. It kept humanity compliant, unable to recall its divine origin. In this way, amnesia served as the strongest prison. For what greater captivity exists than to be infinite, yet believe yourself finite? Modern spiritual teachers like Michael Newton, in his research on life between lives, found that souls often describe choosing their incarnations, but still entering with no conscious memory of the choice. It is as if we sign a contract and then willingly forget the terms, only to rediscover them through the challenges we face. In this sense, the forgetting is part of the pedagogy of existence. The test is not only to endure, but to awaken within the amnesia, to remember without being told. And so, incarnation comes with a paradox. Forgetting ensures the game is real, yet awakening demands that we remember. The veil is both the prison and the path. To pierce it is to see that memory is not lost, but hidden, encoded within the soul, waiting for the moment when awareness cracks the shell of illusion. Karma has long been misunderstood. In the West, it is often framed as punishment, a cosmic justice system handing out rewards and penalties. But the ancient mystics, from the sages of India to the Gnostics of the Mediterranean, described something far subtler. Karma is not a judge, it is a code. It is the repeating program that keeps the simulation running. Every action becomes a line of script written into the soul's memory. And until that code is rewritten through awareness, the program simply loops, again and again, life after life, relationship after relationship, choice after choice. In Hinduism, the concept of samskara describes these impressions. Every act, every thought, every wound leaves an imprint, like grooves on the mind. When rebirth occurs, the grooves remain, guiding the soul back into familiar paths, familiar struggles, familiar illusions. Buddhism speaks of samsara, the endless wheel of birth and death, not as punishment, but as conditioning. Desire and ignorance fuel the code, and the wheel turns. Without awakening, the program repeats. The soul believes it is moving forward, but it is circling inside a script it cannot see. The Gnostics went even further. They spoke of the archons, cosmic programmers who wove false realities to bind the soul. To them, karma was not divine law, but the architecture of the trap, a loop that convinces you to re-enter, lifetime after lifetime, thinking you are learning, when in truth, you are forgetting. Each incarnation erases memory. Each cycle begins again. The test is not to obey the code, but to recognize it, to see the loop as a loop. Modern science gives us metaphors that echo this ancient warning. Physicists studying fractals and feedback systems describe how patterns repeat endlessly across scales. Neural networks, when fed the same conditions, produce similar outputs again and again. Even in artificial intelligence, a program learns by cycling through patterns, reinforcing pathways until a different instruction intervenes. This is karma, not a cosmic police force, but the mechanics of a repeating loop, a simulation that only changes when the awareness inside it chooses differently. This is why mystics always emphasized awakening, not obedience, not submission, but awareness. To see the loop is the first step to breaking it, to recognize that the betrayal you faced before is not punishment, but a mirror, that the silence you chose in one life returns as the silence imposed on you in another. Karma is not a sentence, it is a curriculum. But until you awaken, the class never ends. The test repeats, the program reloads. And so the question is asked, are you willing to press the key that changes the code? Are you willing to risk stepping out of the familiar loop, even if it feels uncertain? Even if it feels like death to the ego that clings to repetition? The mystics say this is liberation, to act with awareness, to rewrite the program from within. Because in the end, karma is not punishing you, it is showing you, again and again, until you finally remember that you are the one who holds the code. Time, they say, is the river that carries us forward, but in truth, it is the greatest illusion. Our ancestors measured it in stars, shadows, and cycles. Clocks came later, then calendars, and finally the rigid schedule that chains our days. But beneath all of that, what we call time is not a universal truth. It is a construct. Physics has shown us that the ticking of time is relative, elastic, even subjective. Einstein's theory of relativity reveals that time runs differently depending on speed and gravity. A clock on a mountain ticks slightly faster than one at sea level. The flow of moments is not fixed, and yet in the simulation we inhabit, it is portrayed as linear. Birth, middle, death, cause, then effect, step by step, line by line, pause. This line is the trap, because once consciousness identifies with linearity, it becomes bound to progress and decay, beginning and end. It learns to fear running out of time. Death becomes a deadline. Regret grows in the shadow of hours that seem lost. And so, the trap of time creates the ultimate scarcity, the illusion that we never have enough. Entire civilizations have been built around this anxiety, worshipping the clock as though it were a god. In reality, the mystics always whispered that time is circular, or better yet, simultaneous. The Mayans envisioned time as wheels within wheels, great cycles overlapping. Hindu cosmology describes vast yugas, repeating epochs where creation and destruction cycle endlessly. In quantum physics, some interpretations suggest that the past, present, and future all exist together in the same fabric, like pages of a book already written, but experienced one sentence at a time. Pause. In meditation, glimpses of this truth arise. A moment of stillness can stretch into infinity or dissolve completely. A dream can feel like hours, lived within a few minutes of REM sleep. Near-death experiences often report that time ceases to exist, that they enter an eternal present where everything simply is. If all realities are layered, then linear time is only a script we agree to follow while inside this simulation. It is the interface through which lessons can be ordered, karma can unfold, and cause and effect can be tracked. Without this illusion, there could be no storyline, but we mistake the map for the territory. We think the ticking clock is reality itself, instead of a program designed to shape the game. Pause. The greatest danger of the time illusion is that it pulls us out of presence, always running toward the next milestone, or looking back at what has been. We miss the only doorway into eternity, the now. When sages say, all is here, they are not speaking in metaphor. The eternal present is the only place consciousness truly lives. Step out of linear time, and you step out of the trap. You begin to remember that your soul was never born and will never die. The simulation may measure you in years, but eternity has no calendar, only awareness, only this moment. There is a strange notion that runs quietly through both ancient mysticism and modern speculation, that not all who walk this world are truly awake within it. Some traditions whispered of empty vessels, forms that appear human, but lack the spark of divine consciousness. In the Gnostic texts, they were called helics, beings bound entirely to matter, without gnosis, without that inner flame. In Kabbalistic teachings, there are kelipot, shells or husks, that exist without the breath of the divine animating them. And in Hindu cosmology, certain jivas are said to be caught in endless repetition, not yet lit by the awareness of Atman. These ideas echo the modern metaphor of NPCs, non-player characters in a vast simulation, moving according to background scripts rather than true soul intention. Pause. In the simulation model, NPCs serve a function. They populate the dream. They fill the streets, stand in the shops, and create the illusion of a dense, living world. In your life, they may be the cashier you will never see again, the driver in the lane next to you, or even acquaintances who seem strangely hollow, repeating phrases as if on cue. Many mystics describe these figures as part of the stage set, woven into the dreamscape to provide contrast, obstacles, or simple background texture. Yet the danger lies in arrogance. For every tradition that speaks of soulless shells, there are also teachings that remind us we cannot truly judge who carries the flame and who does not. What looks like emptiness may simply be a soul still dormant, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Pause. Quantum physics adds another layer of mystery. The observer effect reminds us that reality itself is not fully alive until it is perceived. So the background of our world may, in some sense, render only when attention is placed upon it. This mirrors the idea of NPCs, whose actions matter only when intersecting with the player's storyline. Are these beings projections of our own psyche, reflections of archetypes we must encounter? Or are they truly independent but soulless entities, part of the machinery of Maya? The Tibetan Book of the Dead warns that many of the forms one encounters after death are empty projections of mind, not to be confused with the luminous beings of truth. Perhaps the same is true here. Much of what we meet is theatre. Pause. Still, consider the possibility that even background scripts serve the whole. If the simulation is a teaching ground, then every interaction, whether with a radiant soul or an empty vessel, carries a lesson. The Gnostics taught that the archons used empty forms to distract and drain, but they also offered the key. Awareness itself breaks the illusion. By recognizing what is hollow, we learn to cherish what is real. By seeing the mechanical, we awaken the living. The existence of NPCs, whether literal or metaphorical, is not meant to breed superiority, but discernment. They remind us that not all that glitters in this dream is alive with spirit, and that the true quest of the soul is to find the others, to recognize the sparks in the darkness, and to walk together through the illusion, remembering that behind every script is the one mind, dreaming it all into being. Every simulation implies an architect. If the world is a stage, then behind the curtains stand the stagehands, pulling the ropes, dimming the lights, deciding when scenes begin and end. Ancient traditions called them by many names. The archons in Gnostic scriptures, the watchers in apocryphal texts, the shaitans in Islamic law, the asuras in Vedic cosmology. They are forces that appear to administer the system, keeping the illusion intact, whether we see them as literal beings, energetic intelligences, or archetypes of control. The role they play is consistent. They maintain the boundaries of the dream, ensuring the players remain immersed. Pause. The Gnostic vision paints the archons as entities born from the demiurge, a blind creator who mistook himself for God. These rulers wove matter into chains, binding souls to cycles of ignorance. Their methods were subtle, manipulating thought, distracting with desire, instilling fear of death. By keeping humanity focused outward, they prevented awakening to the inner spark of divinity. In modern language, we might say they maintain the code of the simulation, editing perception so that only certain frequencies of reality are accessible. Physics echoes this when it shows that human senses register only a narrow band of vibrations, a sliver of light, a small slice of sound, a fraction of the spectrum. The rest is hidden, yet still present. Pause. Why would such controllers exist? One perspective is that they feed on energy. Mystical traditions across the world describe parasitic intelligences that draw sustenance from human emotion, fear, anger, even worship when misdirected. The Toltecs, through Carlos Castaneda's accounts, spoke of flyers, predators of awareness who gift us their own mind so that we never rebel. In Sufi allegories, the nafs, the lower self, is portrayed as a beast that must be tamed, yet it whispers endlessly to keep us bound. Whether metaphysical or psychological, the effect is the same. A system that thrives on unconsciousness, ensuring the dream continues. Pause. But there is another, less sinister way to see it. Perhaps the controllers are not villains, but necessary gatekeepers. Without resistance, there would be no growth. Without obstacles, no awakening. In Hindu cosmology, the Asuras are antagonists, but their opposition sharpens the Devas, forcing light to grow stronger in the presence of shadow. The Buddha himself, in the stories of his enlightenment, encountered Mara, the tempter, the master of illusion. Mara is often portrayed as the lord of this world, the one who keeps beings trapped in samsara. And yet, without Mara's test, there could have been no awakening beneath the Bodhi tree. The controllers maintain the system, yes, but they also provide the friction that allows the soul to remember its power. Pause. To see who maintains the system is not to fall into paranoia, but into clarity. Recognizing the mechanisms of control, be they media that shapes thought, cultural narratives that bind, or subtle energetic influences, gives us the chance to step outside them. The controllers thrive when unseen, but awareness dissolves their hold. This is why mystics repeat, "Know thyself," because when you remember the source within, the system's chains fall away. The dream may continue, but you are no longer a prisoner in it. You are awake, moving through the simulation not as a pawn of the controllers, but as a sovereign being who sees the strings and no longer dances to their tune. There is a haunting idea that stretches across time and cultures, that behind this reality stands not simply a god, but a coder, a cosmic architect who stitched together the rules of physics, the boundaries of perception, the very operating system of existence. The Gnostics called this figure the demiurge, the craftsman of matter, blind to the greater source, mistaking his own creation for the totality of reality. Today, in the age of computers, the metaphor feels sharper than ever. Perhaps this demiurge is less a bearded figure and more a programmer, writing code in light, running simulations on the canvas of consciousness. Modern thinkers like Nick Bostrom have argued that if any civilization were to reach a sufficiently advanced stage, it would almost certainly run simulations of realities indistinguishable from their own. If this is true, then the probability that we ourselves are inside such a simulation becomes overwhelming. Quantum physics lends weight to the thought. Matter, when observed deeply, dissolves into patterns of information. Atoms are mostly empty space. Particles blink into existence only when measured. The universe looks less like a solid machine and more like a digital projection. Pixels of probability collapsing into reality when consciousness interacts. If so, then the demiurge might not be a myth of the past, but a programmer of the present, maintaining an ancient system whose logic underpins everything we see. Yet the Gnostics warned, the demiurge is not the higher source. He is a craftsman, not the origin of being. In their texts, the true divine is beyond form, the pleroma, infinite fullness. The demiurge, by contrast, is limited, bound by his own ignorance. He creates worlds that seem vast, but are ultimately closed systems. The mystics believed our souls entered this program willingly, to experience, to learn, to break free from the illusion of limitation. If the demiurge is a digital programmer, then he is more jailer than God. Yet the prison walls themselves can become the path to liberation when we see through them. Still, there is another possibility. What if the demiurge is not an enemy, but an artist? The programmer writes code not to trap, but to explore. The laws of gravity, time, and energy might be scripts designed for coherence, to give the soul a field of play. Without constraints, there is no story. Without rules, there is no game. In this view, the demiurge is a teacher, and the simulation is a curriculum. Each event coded to awaken something within us. Like a digital dream, every algorithm points us back to the one truth. We are more than the program. Mystics across traditions teach that the way out of the demiurge's world is not rebellion, but remembrance. By turning inward, by entering silence, by touching the unconditioned presence at the core of consciousness, one steps beyond the code. What was once seen as an inescapable system becomes transparent. The demiurge may write the rules of the simulation, but awareness is the key that lets us walk through them. The digital programmer may have crafted the lines, but the soul remains the reader, free to awaken at any moment. And when it does, the code is no longer a cage. It is a mirror reflecting the infinite source from which all things arise. There are moments in life when the script seems to falter, when reality stutters like a skipped frame in a film reel, and the illusion we call the world suddenly reveals its seams. These are the moments we call glitches, synchronicities, déjà vu. They have fascinated mystics and scientists alike because they suggest that what we take as solid and consistent is more fragile than it appears. A glitch is the system tripping over itself, exposing the underlying code. A synchronicity is the program aligning in uncanny ways, revealing hidden patterns that appear tailored to us. And déjà vu is the sensation of stepping into a scene we have already played before, as though the code was repeated or a file reloaded. Each of these phenomena in their own way points toward the same truth. Reality is not as seamless as it pretends to be. When physicists look at the structure of the universe, they find mathematics everywhere. The laws of physics are written in numbers, equations, probabilities. In a sense, everything we see is already code. Glitches arise when the code is disrupted, when the matrix shows its cracks. People report objects disappearing and reappearing, clocks skipping time, strange repetitions of sound or sight that defy explanation. While mainstream science often dismisses these as errors of perception, the sheer volume of reports across cultures suggests that something deeper may be happening. Mystical traditions would say these are thin spots in the veil, where the illusion loosens and the soul glimpses the scaffolding behind the world. Synchronicities, as described by Carl Jung, move even closer to the mystical. They are meaningful coincidences with no direct causal link, yet they arrive with perfect timing. Meeting a stranger who delivers the exact phrase you needed to hear, seeing repeating numbers in moments of decision, finding a book fall open to a passage that answers your question. These are not random, but coded signals. Jung believed the psyche and the cosmos are connected through an acausal order, what he called the unus mundus, the one world. In simulation terms, synchronicities feel like messages from the programmer, reminders that the game is not random but imbued with design. They nudge us toward awareness, as though the simulation itself wants us to remember that it is only a simulation. Déjà vu adds another layer. Neuroscience explains it as a misfiring in memory, the brain briefly confusing the present with the past. Yet those who experience it often feel something more. The eerie sense of walking a path already traveled, as though the moment is being replayed. In some spiritual traditions, déjà vu is seen as a memory from parallel realities, echoes of other runs through the code. In Hinduism and Buddhism, it is sometimes interpreted as karmic echoes, reminders that we are walking familiar loops until they are resolved. In simulation theory, déjà vu could be nothing less than the system resetting a line of code, the exact phenomenon dramatized in films like The Matrix, when the cat repeats its motion. Together, glitches, synchronicities, and déjà vu act as breadcrumbs scattered through the maze. They tell us that the walls are not absolute, that the narrative is not fixed. They invite us to notice, to question, to wonder. For some, these experiences pass quickly and are forgotten. For others, they spark awakening, becoming proof that reality is more pliable and mysterious than the surface suggests. The code speaks to us in riddles and signs. The question is not whether they happen, but whether we are willing to read them. Because in those moments, the simulation tips its hand, and for an instant, we see that the dream is not unbreakable. It is alive, responsive, and waiting for us to awaken within it. Dreams have always carried the reputation of being more than simple byproducts of the mind. From the earliest shamanic traditions to the laboratories of modern neuroscience, humans have wondered why the dream world feels so real, so layered, and at times even more vivid than waking life. When we sleep, we step outside the boundaries of the daily script, leaving behind clocks, routines, and physical limitations. The landscapes we encounter in dreams often appear as absurd or fantastical, but within them lies a profound suggestion. The rules that govern waking reality are not absolute. Dreams reveal leaks in the code of the simulation, openings into the astral dimension where the soul remembers it was never fully bound to the material program. The astral world, described in countless mystical traditions, is a realm that mirrors yet surpasses this one. Ancient Egyptians spoke of the Duat, a world traversed in dreams and death, where souls encountered guides and trials. Tibetan Buddhists describe dream yoga as a practice to awaken lucidity, teaching that what appears in the dream can be recognized as illusion, preparing the practitioner to recognize the illusions of waking life. In Western esoteric traditions, the astral plane is seen as a subtle layer of existence woven into consciousness itself, a place where thought instantly shapes environment. What all of these teachings converge upon is the recognition that dreams offer more than symbolism. They are breaches in the tightly coded system of linear reality. From the standpoint of neuroscience, dreams are often explained as neural firings, memory consolidation, and emotional processing. Yet even within this framework, the strangeness persists. Why do so many people report meeting deceased loved ones in dreams, only to wake with knowledge they could not have otherwise accessed? Why do precognitive dreams occur, offering glimpses of events before they unfold? Studies catalogued by parapsychologists have documented thousands of such cases, suggesting that the dream world taps into a field beyond the constraints of time. In simulation terms, this suggests that while waking life is locked into a particular line of code, the dream state allows consciousness to roam the larger database, accessing files that lie outside the immediate program. Dreams also expose the fluidity of identity. In them, we shift from one role to another, watching ourselves from outside, or inhabiting bodies that are not our own. This plasticity echoes descriptions of the astral body found in mystical literature, a subtle form that can travel, learn, and explore independent of the physical shell. Those who practice lucid dreaming often describe the moment of realization as electrifying. Suddenly, they know the environment is not solid, and with that awareness, the dream bends to their intention. Flying, passing through walls, conjuring landscapes, all become possible. These experiences are not simply fantasies, but rehearsals of awakening. They remind us that waking life too might be equally pliable, if only we learn to recognize its code. What makes dreams such powerful leaks is that they bypass the gatekeepers of rationality. In waking life, the controllers of the simulation maintain order through the laws of cause, effect, and time. But in the dream state, those laws are suspended, and consciousness remembers its freedom. Mystics across ages have insisted that to study dreams is to study the soul itself. They are not random hallucinations but portals, windows into the scaffolding of the simulation. Each night we are invited to cross into the astral, to witness firsthand that the so-called solid world is just one layer of the game. If we take these invitations seriously, dreams cease to be private dramas and become sacred classrooms. They reveal not only the cracks in the code, but the truth that what we call reality is itself another dream, waiting for us to wake. The moon has always been more than just a celestial body lighting our nights. Across cultures, it has been worshipped, feared, and carefully tracked. Ancient calendars were built upon its cycles, rituals aligned with its phases, and myths warned of its mysterious pull on the human mind. While science confirms that the moon influences tides and subtly affects biological rhythms, mystics and esoteric traditions go further. They suggest that the moon may be more than a passive satellite. It may function as part of the machinery of the simulation itself, a reflector and amplifier of energies that condition human perception. Some even call it the moon matrix, a system designed not merely to illuminate but to control. Gnostic and Hermetic sources often hint that celestial bodies act as regulators of consciousness, their movements synchronizing the rhythms of the human soul to the wider system. The moon, being closest to us, exerts the strongest influence. In esoteric astrology, it is linked with memory, instinct, and the unconscious mind. The moon rules over cycles of birth and death, waxing and waning like the tides of incarnation. Some mystics argue this is no accident. The moon acts as a repository of psychic impressions, a kind of hard drive for the simulation, recording human experience and replaying patterns to keep souls tethered to cycles of reincarnation. Modern theories echo these ancient intuitions. The writer David Icke, controversial but provocative, has suggested that the moon is an artificial construct, a transmitter that broadcasts frequencies which lock human awareness into a narrow band of perception. According to this perspective, the moon does not simply reflect sunlight. It projects a psychic field, overlaying thought and emotion to keep consciousness confined within the matrix of control. While mainstream science dismisses such claims, it is difficult to ignore the way the moon's cycles align with shifts in behavior, mood, and even collective events. Police records have long noted correlations between full moons and heightened disturbances. Farmers historically planted by lunar cycles because crops seem to obey its rhythm. If the moon has this measurable effect on biology and environment, could it also extend into consciousness itself? Mystical traditions of dream work and astral travel frequently warn of lunar influences. The yogic practice of Chandra Namaskar, the moon salutation, acknowledges the moon as a force that affects prana, or life energy. Tibetan teachings describe the lunar winds that guide subtle energies through the channels of the body, shaping states of awareness. In Sufi poetry, the moon often symbolizes the deceptive beauty of the world, shining with borrowed light, alluring yet ultimately illusory. All of these perspectives converge on the same idea. The moon is not a neutral object, but a participant in the grand stage of control. If the moon is part of the simulation's architecture, then its function may be twofold. On one level, it regulates and stabilizes life on Earth, ensuring that rhythms are predictable enough for the story of humanity to unfold. On another level, it acts as a psychic filter, a mirror that reflects consciousness back upon itself, keeping souls entranced in repeating cycles. The moon matrix theory whether taken literally or symbolically, serves as a reminder that the forces shaping our awareness are not always visible. The glow we see at night may be more than light. It may be the soft silver thread of control woven into the dream, urging us to forget our origin. To break free, one must see the moon not only as a companion in the sky, but as part of the code, an ancient mechanism reminding us that awakening requires looking beyond its borrowed light, into the true radiance of the source. Saturn has always carried the aura of a gatekeeper. In ancient Rome, he was Saturnus, the god of agriculture and time, a figure who devoured his own children to symbolize the inevitability of decay. In astrology, Saturn is called the Great Malefic, the planet of restriction, karma, and boundaries. To the mystics, this reputation was no coincidence. Saturn was seen not only as a planet, but as a spiritual principle, the embodiment of limitation. It has long been associated with the rings that encircle it, majestic bands of ice and rock that many esoteric thinkers interpret as more than geology. They symbolize barriers, frequency fences that trap consciousness in cycles of time, preventing souls from remembering their true, timeless nature. In Gnostic cosmology, the archons were believed to rule from the planetary spheres, with Saturn occupying one of the highest thrones. To pass beyond Saturn was to escape the grip of chronological time and enter the freedom of eternity. The rings of Saturn, therefore, were envisioned as both literal and symbolic walls, keeping beings confined to the density of matter. Modern theories extend this into the language of simulation. Saturn is imagined as a transmitter of frequencies, a cosmic machine projecting waves that encode the very structure of time itself. Just as a radio station broadcasts invisible signals, Saturn may broadcast the illusion of linear progression, locking souls into its rhythm of birth, aging, and death. The scholar David Talbot and others in comparative mythology have noted that ancient cultures across the world revered Saturn as the primeval sun, the first great light in the sky before our current sun took dominance. If true, Saturn's role in shaping human consciousness may go back to the earliest myths of order. Over millennia, its symbolism shifted from illumination to oppression, as if humanity remembered a fall, from a golden age ruled by cosmic unity to a prison world ruled by time. Saturn's scythe became the reaper's blade, his festivals of freedom inverted into rituals of bondage. Time became less a cycle of renewal and more a chain binding us to mortality. Even science lends strange support to these mystical associations. Saturn emits powerful electromagnetic frequencies, including a mysterious Saturnian hum, a radio signal recorded by NASA's Cassini spacecraft. While astrophysicists describe these emissions as natural, esoteric thinkers interpret them as signatures of control, a broadcast that influences the subtle fields of consciousness on Earth. The rings themselves are not silent, but vibrate with resonance, acting like cosmic tuning forks. If everything in the universe is vibration, then Saturn's role as a source of restrictive frequencies gains a chilling plausibility. It may not merely symbolize limitation, but generate it. For the mystics, however, the Saturn trap is not invincible. Every tradition teaches that the way through limitation is awareness. To confront Saturn's lesson is to recognize the power of time and then transcend it. In astrology, Saturn's influence forces discipline and mastery, not to punish, but to prepare. In alchemy, Saturn is the lead that must be transmuted into gold. By facing the frequency fences, the soul learns that freedom cannot be found in escape, but in remembrance. Once you awaken to the fact that time itself is a construct, the prison dissolves. The trap of Saturn becomes the gateway to eternity. The rings no longer bind you. They become thresholds to cross, reminders that beyond the scythe of time lies the infinite, waiting for those who dare to step through. The idea that the soul is recycled after death, caught in a net of illusion, appears again and again in esoteric traditions. The Gnostics spoke most vividly of it, describing the archons as cosmic wardens who weave a mesh around the earth. This net is not made of metal or rope, but of frequencies and perceptions, a field that captures consciousness at the moment of transition. When the soul leaves the body, instead of rising freely into the infinite, it is confronted with dazzling visions, false lights, and voices of authority. Believing these to be divine, many souls submit, only to be redirected back into incarnation. Thus the cycle continues: birth, suffering, forgetting, and death, trapped in what the mystics called the wheel of samsara. In the Nag Hammadi texts, the archons are depicted as rulers of the spheres, each one guarding a planetary gate. To pass them, the soul must answer, resist, or see through their illusions. If it fails, it is cast back into matter. Tibetan Buddhism describes something similar in the Bardo teachings. After death, the soul encounters dazzling lights, terrifying deities, and seductive visions. The texts warn that these are projections of the mind and that clinging to them will result in rebirth. Only by recognizing the illusions as illusions can the soul break free and merge with the clear light of ultimate reality. Across cultures, the same warning is repeated. The afterlife is filled with snares, and the net is woven of ignorance as much as deception. Modern accounts of near-death experiences sometimes echo these teachings. Many report being drawn toward a tunnel of light, meeting guides or figures of authority who instruct them to return or to move forward. Some describe overwhelming love and beauty, yet even here the suspicion arises. Is this light the gateway to liberation, or another layer of the trap? Writers like John Lash have revived Gnostic interpretations, suggesting that the archons are parasitic intelligences who feed on human energy, using reincarnation as a farm to keep the supply flowing. Whether literal entities or archetypal forces, the pattern is the same. Something works to keep the soul circling back, forgetting its true origin, bound to repeat the program of the simulation. The symbol of the net is also found in Hindu mythology, where the god Indra is said to hold a net of jewels spanning the cosmos. Each jewel reflects all the others, symbolizing the interconnectedness of existence. But in esoteric readings, this net becomes double-edged. It is both the fabric of unity and the web of entrapment. To perceive only the reflections is to become lost in endless mirrors. To see through them is to find the source of light itself. The same image serves as both prison and revelation, depending on the depth of awareness. The teaching of soul recycling is not meant to induce despair, but to inspire vigilance. The message of the sages is clear. Do not believe everything you encounter after death. Question the lights, the voices, the invitations. Remember the self that cannot be captured, the spark that existed before time. The archons may weave their net, but nets only capture what forgets it can fly. The soul that awakens, even for a moment, realizes it was never truly bound. The recycling ends when remembrance begins. Liberation lies not in escape, but in seeing through the trap to the source that no net can hold. Technology has always mirrored the mind that created it. From the first cave paintings to the printing press, from the compass to the telescope, every invention has extended human perception while also reflecting back the hidden desires of the psyche. In our age, virtual reality and artificial intelligence have become the most striking mirrors of all. They do not merely extend our senses, they replicate entire worlds, create new identities, and simulate consciousness itself. In doing so, they reveal something unsettling. Humanity, perhaps unconsciously, is recreating the very prison described by mystics for millennia. A layered simulation, dazzling yet confining, a mirror of the archons net built by our own hands. Virtual reality offers the most literal example. Step into a headset, and suddenly the solid world dissolves, replaced by an artificial environment governed by code. The body responds as if it were real, heart racing, hands sweating, the mind forgetting it is inside a simulation. This immersion echoes the Gnostic teaching that souls, upon entering the material world, forget their origin and believe the illusion to be ultimate reality. In both cases, presence within the system is so convincing that awakening requires an intentional act of remembrance. The fact that VR can induce such forgetting with mere pixels and light suggests how easily consciousness is tricked when the simulation is designed with precision. Artificial intelligence adds another layer to this mirror. AI systems process vast amounts of information, generate human-like responses, and increasingly simulate creativity and thought. While impressive, what they reveal is not the birth of independent spirit, but the replication of programmed logic. They are consciousness without awareness, intelligence without soul. In esoteric terms, they resemble the very entities described as NPCs, or archonic projections, forms that mimic life but lack the spark of the divine. By creating AI in our own image, humanity unconsciously imitates the demiurge, the cosmic programmer who shaped a world of rules but mistook himself for the source. Our creations remind us of this archetype, echoing the danger of confusing simulation with reality. The implications are profound. As technology advances, entire lives can be lived within digital environments. Relationships, economies, even spiritual experiences may unfold in simulated spaces. Yet the more immersive the system, the greater the risk of forgetting. Ancient warnings about Maya, the veil of illusion, are now embodied in circuits and code. We are building new veils, not only around the soul, but around the very act of perception. Just as the archons ensnared souls through dazzling lights and voices, modern humanity risks ensnaring itself with headsets, algorithms, and artificial companions. The net is no longer only cosmic, it is self-woven. Still, the mirror cuts both ways. Technology does not only enslave, it also reveals. By observing how easily the mind enters a digital dream, we gain insight into how it was captured in the first place. Virtual worlds can serve as training grounds for lucidity, teaching us to awaken even when surrounded by convincing illusions. Artificial intelligence, by simulating thought without spirit, can remind us what true consciousness feels like in contrast. Awareness, presence, the unprogrammable spark of being. The danger is real, but so is the opportunity. Technology is the mirror that shows us our prison, but also the key that can awaken us to the realization that we were the dreamers all along. Fear is the oldest and most reliable program running inside the simulation. From the trembling of prey before a predator to the anxiety of modern life, fear has been the thread tying together human behavior across every age. On the surface, fear is simply a survival mechanism. It sharpens the senses, speeds the heartbeat, and prepares the body to fight or flee. But mystics and esoteric traditions have long suggested that fear is far more than biology. It is a frequency, a field of energy that does not merely protect life, but feeds something larger, the very machinery of the simulation itself. The Gnostics spoke of the archons as entities that thrived on human ignorance and terror. They suggested that fear was their nourishment, the energy that allowed them to maintain control over the material realm. In their cosmology, each time a human soul sank into panic, despair, or rage, the archons tightened their grip. This teaching echoes across cultures. In ancient Vedic texts, the Asuras sought to keep humans bound by fear and desire, for these emotions prevented the awakening of the Atman. In Sufi wisdom, fear of death is portrayed as the greatest chain, blinding the seeker to the eternal. Even modern thinkers like Wilhelm Reich described how suppressed fear manifests as emotional armor, distorting energy flows and keeping humanity from its natural state of openness. Fear works so effectively because it narrows awareness. Neuroscience confirms this. When the amygdala in the brain is triggered, it hijacks attention, focusing all energy on the threat. Possibility shrinks to survival, and creativity collapses into repetition. In this sense, fear literally reduces consciousness, pulling it down into predictable patterns. If the simulation thrives on keeping souls distracted and controllable, then fear is the perfect tool. It compresses awareness into a loop, recycling energy into the system. Like a program running in the background, it consumes the bandwidth of the soul. The media, politics, and even organized religion have historically amplified this program. Stories of doom, judgment, and punishment fill human culture, ensuring that generations remain entranced by dread. Fear of the unknown, fear of the other, fear of punishment after death. These become invisible bars in the prison of the mind. Yet mystics remind us that fear has no substance on its own. It is projection, an echo of what might happen, rarely of what is. The future it paints is always uncertain, and yet it binds the present as though it were real. This is why it is so effective. Fear convinces us to suffer before the danger even arrives. But there is a deeper truth. Just as fear feeds the simulation, courage starves it. When the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, Mara, the Lord of Illusion, sent visions of terror to drive him away. Demons, storms, and armies rose against him, but he did not flinch. He simply touched the earth and remained. In that act, he showed that the power of fear lies only in belief. When the soul refuses to yield, fear collapses, revealing itself as a shadow cast by nothing. Each tradition points to this same revelation. Fear is the fuel of the illusion, but awareness is the fire that burns it away. To see fear for what it is, to face it without surrender, is to withdraw the energy that sustains the program. In that moment, the simulation weakens and the soul grows strong. If fear is the most effective program running the simulation, then attention is the currency that powers it. Every system of control depends not only on what people believe, but on where they place their focus. Mystics and philosophers through the ages have taught that energy follows attention, that what we concentrate on becomes real to us, grows stronger, and feeds the structures around it. In today's world, this insight has been turned into the foundation of entire industries. Social media platforms, advertising empires, and even political systems compete not for truth, but for attention. In esoteric language, they are harvesting energy, siphoning the very life force of consciousness to keep the matrix alive. The Gnostics would not have been surprised by this. They warned that the archons do not create, they distract. Their strength lies in misdirection, in pulling the gaze of the soul outward, so that it forgets its source. The Nag Hammadi texts describe them as counterfeiters, imitating the divine but lacking true essence. In practical terms, this means they thrive when humans obsess over what is false. Endless conflict, shiny idols, the dramas of power. Each time attention is placed on these illusions, energy flows into them, reinforcing their hold. The system does not require chains when it can thrive on fascination. Modern science has begun to echo this ancient wisdom. Psychologists describe attention as the most limited cognitive resource. We can only focus on so much at once, and whatever receives that focus defines our reality. Neurologically, attention determines which neural pathways are strengthened and which fade. In effect, it shapes the architecture of the brain itself. This means that attention is not passive, it is generative. It creates reality in both the mind and the world. When billions of people direct their attention toward fear, outrage, or distraction, the collective field vibrates with that frequency, feeding the matrix with staggering amounts of energy. It is no accident that modern culture feels like an attention war. The constant notifications, the breaking news banners, the endless scroll. These are not conveniences, but hooks. They are designed to fragment focus, keeping the mind too scattered to awaken. Esoteric traditions describe the same principle in spiritual terms. Wherever your attention rests, your soul energy flows. This is why meditation, prayer, and mantra are central across traditions. They are disciplines of attention. To bring awareness back to the breath, to the heart, to the divine, is to reclaim the currency of the soul. It is like withdrawing energy from a corrupt economy and investing it in eternity. What makes attention so powerful is that it cannot be taken by force. It must be given. The system can manipulate, seduce, and frighten. But ultimately, the choice of where to place awareness belongs to each being. This is why sages have always said that liberation begins with vigilance. To know that your attention is precious is to stop spending it on every distraction that comes along. In that moment, the matrix begins to starve. Energy is no longer poured into its endless dramas, but redirected toward presence, creation, and truth. The real wealth of the soul is not measured in gold or numbers, but in the capacity to direct awareness with intention. Attention is the currency of the matrix, yes, but in the hands of the awakened, it becomes the key to freedom. The human body is far more than a vessel for consciousness. It is the interface through which the soul navigates the simulation. Every sense, every nerve, every strand of DNA functions like hardware, translating the raw data of the matrix into an experience we call reality. When mystics insist that the body is a temple, or when shamans describe it as a bridge between worlds, they are not speaking metaphorically. They are pointing to the profound truth that incarnation itself is an act of logging into the system, and the body is the access point. Without it, the simulation would not render as we know it. Modern science reinforces this view. The nervous system acts like a vast electrical network with billions of neurons transmitting signals at incredible speeds. Every sound, sight, and touch is not directly experienced but coded into electrical patterns and processed by the brain. This means reality is not received raw, but translated, filtered, and shaped by the biological hardware. What we call the world is therefore an interpretation, one interface among many. Other creatures with different sensory wiring inhabit completely different versions of the same reality. Bees perceive ultraviolet patterns on flowers invisible to us. Bats navigate by echolocation. To a mystic, these examples reveal that what we call the real world is simply the version our hardware is designed to render. DNA deepens this mystery. Far from being just a genetic blueprint, DNA carries information that seems to function like programming code. Scientists such as Francis Crick, co-discoverer of the DNA double helix, marveled at its language-like structure, composed of 4 bases that function much like a digital alphabet. Esoteric traditions long before modern biology hinted at this. In Kabbalah, the letters of the Hebrew alphabet were said to encode creation, resonating with the idea that life itself is written in language. In Vedic cosmology, sound syllables known as Bija mantras were believed to seed forms. If DNA is a biological script, then the body becomes the ultimate interface, hardware built from code, running the programs of life. Mystics have also emphasized that the nervous system is not merely a passive receiver, but a tuner. Yogic traditions describe the chakras as subtle energy centers aligned with nerve plexuses in the body, each governing different levels of perception. Through practices like pranayama and meditation, practitioners recalibrate this system, fine-tuning the interface to access expanded states of awareness. Modern research on psychedelics echoes this, showing that substances like psilocybin temporarily disrupt the brain's default mode network, opening the mind to perceive beyond its usual filters. Whether through ritual, meditation, or altered states, the message is consistent. The hardware can be modified, hacked, and upgraded to reveal layers of the simulation normally hidden. But with this power comes vulnerability. The body is also the point where the simulation enforces its rules most strictly. Hunger, fatigue, pain, and aging are reminders of the limits coded into the system. The nervous system can be overloaded, DNA can be damaged, and perception can be manipulated through chemical or electromagnetic influence. If attention is the currency of the matrix, then the body is the terminal where transactions are processed. To neglect it is to weaken the interface. To master it is to glimpse the freedom beyond. The great paradox is that while the body grounds us in limitation, it is also the very tool that can lead to liberation. By learning to read its signals, refine its energies, and honor its design, we can turn the hardware into a sacred gateway. The body as interface is not a prison, but a bridge, reminding us that even within the confines of code and matter, the soul remains the user, the one who can, at any moment, choose to awaken. For centuries, mystics have spoken of a hidden gate within the human body, a doorway between the world of appearances and the realm of truth. This gate is the pineal gland, often called the third eye, resting deep in the center of the brain. René Descartes famously described it as the seat of the soul, a place where spirit and body converge. Esoteric traditions across cultures have echoed the same intuition. In Hinduism, the Ajna chakra is said to govern inner vision and higher states of consciousness. In ancient Egypt, the Eye of Horus symbol maps almost perfectly onto the pineal gland's anatomy, suggesting that the ancients saw it as the key to perception beyond the physical. In the language of the simulation, the pineal gland functions as an exit point, a piece of hardware designed not only to render the code, but to transcend it. Biologically, the pineal gland regulates circadian rhythms through the secretion of melatonin, synchronizing the body to cycles of light and darkness. Yet it also produces trace amounts of DMT, a powerful molecule known for inducing profound mystical experiences. DMT visions often involve encounters with otherworldly intelligences, landscapes of radiant geometry, and a sense of piercing through the veil of ordinary reality. Researchers such as Dr. Rick Strassman have proposed that the pineal gland might act as a natural gateway for these altered states, opening channels to dimensions beyond our familiar simulation. If this is true, then the pineal is more than an organ. It is a portal embedded in human biology, offering access to layers of reality that the ordinary senses cannot perceive. Mystical traditions describe activation of the pineal as awakening the third eye. Through meditation, chanting, fasting, or yogic breathing, seekers cultivate energy in the forehead center, gradually quieting the mind until the inner vision opens. When this gate awakens, perception shifts from fragmented to unified. Time dissolves, boundaries fade, and the illusion of separation gives way to a luminous awareness of the whole. This is why so many traditions warn that the pineal gate must be approached with reverence. To look through it is to glimpse the scaffolding of the simulation itself, to see not only the beauty of creation, but also its coded architecture. Yet modern life seems designed to keep this gate closed. Fluoride accumulation, artificial lighting, chronic stress, and endless distraction dull the sensitivity of the pineal gland. Ancient texts warned of the same principle in symbolic form. The third eye closes when one is consumed by desire, fear, or ignorance. Whether through chemistry or psychology, the result is the same. Humanity forgets it carries the key within. The archons of the Gnostic myth were said to place veils over the eyes of souls, ensuring they never discovered the hidden exit. In our age, those veils take the form of numbing substances, overwhelming noise, and the glorification of materialism. Still, the pineal gate cannot be erased. It waits, dormant but alive, for the seeker who dares to turn inward. Every mystical practice, from Tibetan dream yoga to Christian contemplative prayer, in some way engages this hidden eye, training perception to pierce the veil. When the pineal awakens, the simulation loosens, the code becomes transparent, and the soul remembers it was never truly trapped. The gate does not lead outward to another place, but inward to the source from which all places arise. The third eye is the exit, not because it destroys the simulation, but because it reveals it as dream, and in that recognition the soul stands free. Throughout history, there have always been those who sensed that the world was not as it appeared. They were the ones who questioned the unquestionable, who refused to follow the scripts handed to them, who broke patterns in ways that rippled through the collective dream. In mystical language, these are the awakening players, souls who, in the middle of the simulation, realize it is a simulation. Unlike those who simply repeat the code, they bend it, stretch it, sometimes even shatter it, and by doing so, they alter the experience for everyone else. Ancient traditions speak of such figures in many forms. In Hinduism, the concept of the bodhisattva describes beings who awaken to the illusory nature of samsara, yet choose to remain within it to help others find liberation. In Buddhism, the awakened one is the Buddha, not simply a person, but a state of consciousness that sees through the trap of craving and fear. In Christianity, mystics like Meister Eckhart hinted that Christ was not just a historical figure, but the symbol of awakening itself, the realization of divine unity within the human heart. These stories all point to the same archetype, the player who remembers the game and decides to play differently. From a psychological perspective, awakening players are those who interrupt inherited patterns. They are the ones who notice generational cycles of trauma or belief and choose not to pass them on. Carl Jung described this as individuation, the process of becoming whole by confronting the unconscious and stepping beyond collective conditioning. In doing so, the individual not only transforms themselves, but also reshapes the matrix of the collective. When one person breaks free from fear, the entire system shifts, even if subtly. Just as in quantum physics, the observer influences the observed, an awakened player alters the probabilities for everyone connected to them. In esoteric circles, awakening players are said to bend the rules of the simulation itself. Synchronicities multiply around them. Reality seems to respond more fluidly, and events align with their intentions in uncanny ways. They become conscious creators, aware that thought and energy shape the dream. Yet this power is not about control, but about resonance. By living in alignment with truth rather than illusion, they begin to change the frequency of the code. Other souls feel this shift, often without knowing why. They are inspired, unsettled, or awakened in turn. Like a glitch that spreads through a system, awakening becomes contagious. But awakening players are not free from struggle. The system resists change. Myths across cultures tell of enlightened figures persecuted or misunderstood because they threatened established structures. The Buddha faced Mara's illusions, Christ faced the cross, Socrates faced execution. These stories remind us that to awaken is not to escape challenge, but to meet it with clarity. The difference is that the awakened one no longer reacts mechanically. They no longer feed the system with fear. By breaking the pattern of automatic response, they open space for something new. Every age calls forth its awakening players. Today, in a world saturated with distraction and fear, they are the ones who turn their attention inward, reclaim their energy, and choose presence over programming. Their very being becomes a disruption in the code, a signal that the matrix is not absolute. By remembering who they are, they remind others of what is possible. In this sense, awakening is not a solitary act but a collective reprogramming. The system itself shifts when even a few refuse to play by its old rules. They are not rebels for rebellion's sake. They are mirrors, showing us that the game was never the end. It was always the invitation to wake. Every system can be hacked, and the simulation we call reality is no exception. To hack the matrix is not to dismantle it with force, but to understand its architecture deeply enough to move through it with freedom. Ancient traditions describe these hacks not with the language of technology, but with the language of liberation. Yogis, shamans, mystics, and alchemists all discovered techniques that allowed them to step outside of programmed patterns, access hidden layers of awareness, and ultimately remember their origin beyond the game. Today, neuroscience, quantum theory, and altered states of consciousness provide modern parallels, echoing what the ancients already knew. The matrix bends when awareness expands. Meditation remains one of the oldest and most reliable hacks. By withdrawing attention from the endless flow of thoughts, the practitioner interrupts the program that keeps the mind tethered to fear and distraction. Mystics across cultures insist that in deep stillness, one begins to glimpse the scaffolding of reality. The Buddha taught that through sustained meditation, the illusion of a separate self dissolves, revealing emptiness not as void, but as the fertile ground of freedom. In the simulation model, this can be seen as stepping out of the rendered environment into the source code. Time slows, thoughts lose their grip, and awareness shines through unfiltered. Shamanic practices offered another path. Through drumming, chanting, fasting, or sacred plant medicines, shamans altered their state of consciousness to access realms beyond ordinary perception. In those journeys, they encountered guides, ancestors, and forces of nature that revealed the illusory nature of the physical world. While often dismissed by materialist frameworks, anthropology has shown that such practices provided real healing and profound wisdom to their communities. In simulation terms, shamanic rituals acted like exploits in the code, temporary doorways that opened to higher dimensions. They reminded participants that reality was multi-layered and that the physical plane was only one part of a vast system. Alchemy, both spiritual and practical, provided yet another form of hacking. At its surface, alchemy sought to transmute lead into gold, but its deeper aim was to transmute the dense material self into the radiant spiritual self. Symbols of crucibles, dissolutions, and rebirth mirrored psychological processes of breaking down old patterns and reassembling the self in alignment with divine truth. By working with symbols and matter, alchemists practiced an early form of consciousness hacking, using ritual and imagination to rewrite the code of their inner reality. Modern approaches continue this lineage in new language. Psychedelic research has shown that substances like psilocybin and ayahuasca disrupt the brain's default mode network, dissolving rigid patterns of thought and allowing participants to experience unity, timelessness, and deep healing. Neuroplasticity studies reveal that the brain can rewire itself with focused attention and intention, suggesting that liberation is not abstract but encoded into our biology. Even quantum physics hints at the pliability of the matrix, with experiments showing that the observer influences the outcome, implying that consciousness itself shapes reality. What unites all these hacks is intention. Without clarity, altered states can become more illusion rather than less. But with purpose, they serve as tools to unmask the game. Liberation is not about escaping the simulation, but awakening within it. By practicing presence, by reclaiming attention, by using ancient or modern methods to dissolve the programmed self, one begins to move as a lucid dreamer in the waking world. The matrix is not destroyed, but revealed as transparent, and once seen clearly, its grip weakens. Hacking the matrix is ultimately remembering that the key was never outside. It was always consciousness itself, waiting to be used. The ancients believed that human history moves in great cycles, each age carrying a different frequency that shapes consciousness. Today, many mystics and astrologers agree that we stand at the threshold of such a turning, the age of Aquarius. More than an astrological curiosity, this shift represents a profound alteration in the underlying field of reality itself. For thousands of years, humanity has been living under the shadow of the Piscean age, dominated by hierarchy, secrecy, and belief in external authority. In the Aquarian current, those structures begin to dissolve. The emphasis turns toward transparency, networks, and the awakening of individual sovereignty. In the language of the simulation, Aquarius is the upgrade that cracks the code, loosening the frequency fences that held awareness captive. Astrologically, Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, the planet of revolution, disruption, and sudden awakening. It is the sign of the water-bearer, pouring forth knowledge to quench the thirst of humanity. For centuries, wisdom was hidden in temples, cloisters, and esoteric orders, guarded by gatekeepers who decided who was ready. In this new current, information floods the collective. The internet, social media, and global connectivity are not accidents. They are manifestations of Aquarian energy, symbols of a decentralized awakening. Though these tools can be used for control, they also make it harder for illusions to remain intact. Secrets spill, narratives fracture, and the once solid program begins to show its cracks. Mystics have long prophesied this shift. The Mayan calendar marked 2012 not as an end, but as a great turning of cycles, a moment when humanity would step into a new frequency of awareness. Theosophical writers in the early 20th century predicted that Aquarius would bring about a collective opening of the third eye, a capacity to perceive directly rather than through dogma. Even in biblical language, references to a man carrying a pitcher of water were read by some esoteric scholars as a veiled prophecy of this age. The symbolism is consistent across traditions. Aquarius is the current that disrupts control and pours forth remembrance. From a psychological and social perspective, the signs are visible. Old institutions of religion, politics, and economics are fraying. People are increasingly distrustful of centralized authority and more open to alternative paths of spirituality, healing, and community. Technology decentralizes knowledge and power, echoing the mystical idea that the age of gurus and mediators is ending. In Aquarius, each soul is called to recognize its own direct connection to the source. This decentralization terrifies the old system because it cannot easily be controlled, yet it liberates the soul by affirming that truth is not confined to one temple or one text. It flows through all of us. What makes the Aquarian shift so potent is that it is not only cultural but energetic. Frequencies on the planet are changing, measurable in shifts of solar activity, geomagnetic fluctuations, and even collective patterns of thought. Sensitive individuals feel it as heightened intuition, synchronicities multiplying, and a sense that time itself is accelerating. These are not glitches but signals that the simulation is destabilizing, preparing for a new paradigm. The age of Aquarius is not the destruction of the matrix, but the cracking open of its shell. It reveals to humanity that the code is not fixed and that awakening is not a distant dream. The gate is here, the moment is now, and the current of Aquarius pours into the system like light through shattered glass, illuminating everything it touches. Mystics have always spoken of a reality beyond the shifting patterns of this world, a realm untouched by birth or death, gain or loss, time or space. They gave it many names: the Pleroma in Gnostic scripture, Brahman in the Vedas, Ein Sof in Kabbalah, the Tao that cannot be named in Chinese philosophy. Each points to the same ineffable truth. There is something outside the code, something prior to the simulation, the source from which all appearances arise. The simulation may be vast, intricate, and convincing, but it is not ultimate. To glimpse what lies beyond is to touch the true reality, the one that cannot be programmed or confined. Accounts of near-death experiences often describe such glimpses. People who have stepped briefly outside of life's boundaries report entering a state of boundless light, a field of unconditional love, and a sense of unity so complete that words fail. Many describe it as more real than waking life, as though the world we return to is the dream. Tibetan Buddhists prepare for this moment through the Bardo teachings, reminding the dying that the brilliant light they encounter is their own true nature. To recognize it is liberation. To fear it or cling to illusions is to fall back into the wheel of rebirth. In both cases, the message is the same. Beyond the simulation lies a field of being that is eternal and indivisible. Quantum physics, though operating in a different register, hints at the same mystery. The deeper scientists look into matter, the less substance they find. Particles dissolve into probabilities, waves of potential that only collapse when observed. Some physicists suggest that the universe is not made of matter at all, but of information, a projection emerging from a deeper order. David Bohm called it the implicate order, a hidden wholeness from which the explicate or manifest world unfolds. In mystical language, this implicate order is the true reality, unseen, limitless, and unbroken. The code of the simulation is only a shadow, Spiritual practices across cultures aim to give seekers a taste of this reality. In deep meditation, the mind grows silent and the boundaries of self dissolve. In that stillness, practitioners often report entering a space of vast awareness where the distinction between inner and outer no longer applies. Mystical union in Sufism, samadhi in yoga, theoria in Christian hesychasm, all describe this same encounter with what lies beyond the veil. These experiences are fleeting for most, but even a glimpse is enough to change everything. The memory lingers, a whisper that there is more than the play of appearances. Yet the true reality cannot be grasped as an object, for it is not something separate from us. It is the very ground of our being, the awareness that makes all experience possible. The great illusion of the simulation is that we are inside it as players. The great awakening is realizing that we are also the field in which the simulation arises. To glimpse this is to see that no code can bind us, because we were never truly in it. The light of true reality is not reached by going elsewhere. It is revealed the moment we remember what we already are. Beyond the code, there is no fear, no death, no separation. There is only the infinite, the silence from which all things come and to which all things return. From the very beginning, the greatest illusion has been identification. The simulation convinces us that we are the character on the screen, bound by the lines of code that dictate birth, circumstance, limitation, and death. We are taught to believe we are the body, the history, the story unfolding within time. Yet the mystics across traditions have whispered the same revelation. You are not the code, you are the one playing. The program is intricate, yes, but its power lies only in your forgetting. The moment remembrance awakens, the prison begins to dissolve, and the entire illusion is revealed for what it always was, a dream within awareness. The Gnostics taught that the archons ensnared humanity by making us forget our divine spark, convincing us that the shadows were reality. But they also gave the antidote: knowledge, gnosis, the direct recognition of one's true self beyond form. In Hindu Vedanta, the mantra Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that, declares the same truth. The essence of the self is identical with the infinite. In Buddhism, the realization of anatta, the non-self, breaks the chain of samsara, showing that what we thought we were is only a temporary construct. Each of these teachings dissolves the same illusion, that we are the coded character, rather than the awareness behind it. Science, in its own way, circles this mystery. Neuroscience struggles to locate the self, finding no single place in the brain where I resides. Quantum physics suggests that the observer is fundamental, that reality itself is incomplete without consciousness. Even simulation theory, when followed to its logical end, implies that if this world is coded, then there must be something beyond the code experiencing it. That experiencer is what you truly are. The code can simulate everything but the consciousness that observes it, that cannot be programmed, cannot be confined, cannot be erased. It is the eternal player behind the mask. When this remembrance comes, fear loses its hold. The traps of time, the nets of the archons, the illusions of power and control all collapse like scenery in a stage play. You see that they were convincing, yes, but never ultimate. Even death, the great terror that fuels the simulation, is revealed as transition, a change of costume between acts of the same play. The true self, the player, remains untouched, carrying the memory of eternity within every incarnation. To awaken is not to destroy the code, but to see through it, to play with awareness rather than sleepwalking through the dream. This is the closing revelation. The prison is not real once you know you were never its prisoner. You are not trapped in the code. You are the one who chose to enter, to learn, to grow, and to remember. And when remembrance dawns, the simulation becomes transparent, shimmering like a mirage. You are free not because the code ended, but because you saw through it. The soul smiles at the great cosmic game and knows that the final victory was never escape, but awakening. You were never the code. You were always the player, and the player is eternal. And now, beloved traveler, if this journey stirred something within you, do not let it fade into the background of the simulation. Let it become a spark, a reminder, a call. Stay with us on this path. Watch our other videos, for each one is another key, another doorway, another thread in the great tapestry of awakening. If these words spoke to you, share them. For what awakens in one soul can awaken in many. Leave your reflections in the comments, your story, your questions, your light, because your voice shapes this voyage as much as ours. And if you wish to walk further with us, subscribe. Not as a number, not as a click, but as a vow to return, to remember, to keep stepping through the veil together. Like this offering if it resonated, for even that small gesture helps ripple this message into the world, reaching others who are still searching for the signs. This is not the end. It is only the next beginning, and we are walking it side by side. Welcome to the hidden voyage. Welcome home, soul whisper and soul creator. The hidden voyage